Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios, broadcasting as ever on the beautiful beaches of the Space Coast of Florida, the last free state in America. It is November 10th. I'm joined in the studio virtually by Greg Ward, who is a co-founder of CERTIHASH and Smart Ledger, a lot of blockchain-related stuff. I should have his title better, but I'm actually terrible at those things pre-coffee. So, but anyway, Greg, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much, Christopher. Great to be here.
So let's dive right in. I've heard about this brand new tech toy that the kids call blockchain. Tell me everything. I'm just going to sit back and have my caffeine.
Sure. Blockchain technology. So I think, the first time that the majority of the world really started to discover and hear about blockchain was through Bitcoin. 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto released the white paper, started the network. A lot of people, didn't really understand what it was, what it was for, what it did. The initial, use case, if you will, was peer-to-peer cash transactions, internet money, if you will, solving what the internet did not have, which was the ability to send microtransactions peer-to-peer, removing third parties. But the blockchain integrated technologies that incorporated these hash functions and these abilities to have an interlocking blocks of transactions, right? So you have this continuous line of integrity of data that is able to be checked back against itself. So that, coupled with this distribution of mining nodes, which all maintain a mirror image of the ledger, gave us for the first time in history, a global ledger that solved the so-called Byzantine general problem.
Let's pause there.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant summation for every smart tech nerd. That's fine, not a pejorative term, on the planet. For the lay people out there, let's take it piece by piece. Right? I think what's critical is what most people don't get. They have a concept when they swipe their Visa or MasterCard at a vendor, a restaurant, a store, that somehow some portion of that payment is going to Visa to facilitate that ease of transaction. You don't have to carry wads of cash around. You can go buy a computer, by swiping a MasterCard. But on the internet, if someone wants to buy, a $30 book, well, that's fine. MasterCard charges a minimum to Amazon, and they take that money. But for billions of people on the planet who live in countries where, annual income is, $300 a year, you can actually build a real business selling services or products for like 8 cents. But you can't do that because Visa or MasterCard is a 40-cent minimum plus 2.5% on top of it. So that first part of the blockchain, which is part of why Satoshi created Bitcoin, right, was to actually radically democratize internet commerce for the people. And all of that, I would say, has been lost in the absurdity of BTC, quote unquote, Bitcoin, skyrocketing into the tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I'd be curious about your take on that. Like, how did, in your experience or the way you've seen this, how did a smooth rail, low cost payment processing, money delivery mechanism, as you say, peer to peer without an intermediary, how did that turn into, I'm a Bitcoin gajillionaire because I bought 1,000 of these at 40 cents on a lark and they went to 80 grand? What do you think? How do you think that happened?
Yeah, I think it was a number of things. I think that people who were there when they were first starting to get into it, the very, very early OGs, the Bitcoin didn't have a price, right? So, it didn't have a price. It was created with this idea of price. It would find its price realization as the value of it. The network started to find itself. We hear about the $15,000 pizza that was purchased, because someone had to make a first purchase. Somebody had to make the first accepting of Bitcoin. And it was that cheap in the beginning. It was, thousandth of a penny transaction fees. We had free transactions even in the beginning. You started to have a debate within the internal blockchain developers that were brought in after Satoshi had kind of stepped away from the project. Gavin Andreessen, who was given the lead of the project by Satoshi, he brought in some other developers, and there started ensuing a debate on how many transactions can fit inside of a block. We've all heard, or many of us have heard about this so-called block size war, and it became a debate. And so you had kind of these two sides. One was speaking about this idea of resistance against government, or the ability to have government resistant money, the ability to run your own so-called node, which allows you to see the entire ledger. And then you had the other side, which was those who were actually brought into the project early, Gavin Andreessen, who had brought in Mike Hearn. They were looking at scalabilities to accomplish the purpose of the white paper. So they were looking at technological solutions of how to solve this. You could look back at some of Mike Hearn's early frustrations and his discussions of it and saying, I just don't understand what these guys are doing. Every time I bring up a solution, they bring up a philosophical debate that is impossible to overcome. Because every time you try to bring up another solution, they want to bring up another philosophy. And so it became a more of a kind of running around in circles to the point where Mike eventually left. He was a former Google employee, who his job was scalability, right? He understood this. Anyway, so I think then you had that mixed in with Silk Road became this place where people started using Bitcoin, right? So then all of a sudden it had some more so-called value of transactional use in that space, and became more so-called famous, and it became
and for all the wrong reasons. For those who don't know, Silk Road was basically a platform for selling illegal drugs and guns, and run by some nerd sitting in a library in San Francisco, of all things, who's now in jail forever.
Exactly. And so then it found itself catching on and people seeing its value. And then all of a sudden, the combination of people having Bitcoin from early mining, maybe transacting on Silk Road, whatever, maybe they just had some, and all of a sudden price started going up, and people started seeing it less and less as a means to have peer-to-peer payments and more as oh man, I got in early, look how wealthy I am, look how smart I was. And then you had also that kind of coming into it, where you had this smartness debate, where I was smart because I got in early, right, on something that the world all of a sudden, became took on it became so valuable, $20,000 and whatnot. So the idea of scalability became less of a issue or less of a concern, because all these guys were concerned about making money, and there's only 21 million. That became the philosophy. It's a scarcity debate. So yeah,
so they started yapping about digital gold.
Exactly. Well, and you also had Ethereum come out in 2015, and then the continuation or the creation of these altcoins. So it became a replication of this phenomenon of what we would deem now as an unregistered securities market, right? So we see it work once. We see the government not talking,
right,
and coming
down. I
can
become a billionaire out of thin air again by creating, wiggly coin.
Yeah. And I think some of them may have happened organically, and some of them were, many of them, I guarantee, were contrived and conceived of for the purposes of doing exactly what we did.
Oh, absolutely. Why not? How could you not? It's like a free money machine.
Yeah. Which then culminated in FTX, right?
Right.
Which as just one last side note, a lot of people ask, well, Greg, this FTX collapse, doesn't it show that blockchain is not, what you thought it was? And of course, the idea is everything you saw in FTX was a result of just bad, illegal practices.
It's classic old Ponzi scheme fraud. I mean, he could have done that with baseball cards or beanie babies. Doesn't matter what he did it with.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great. Well, as an unrepentant big blocker, and I'll throw hands with anyone about that. Considering the universe of people with one would physically, get into an altercation, I feel confident about that. The more practical uses of it, right? So everyone starts talking about blockchain. It's always entangled with Bitcoin. It's always entangled with cryptocurrencies, which, as Satoshi has said to me himself, is odd because it's neither cryptographically sound nor is it a currency, which I absolutely love. The real uses, and when you talk about the view into the ledger, and you mentioned the Byzantine Empire earlier in a context which I'm sure has nothing to do with arguments about the nature of the Trinity. So maybe expand on that a little bit. Like when you say you get a view into the ledger, what does that mean for someone who doesn't know? Like, what does that actually mean? What are you looking at when you say I'm looking into the ledger?
Sure. So, well, let's start by saying we have a network of users. So that means people who are participating. I want to send you a Bitcoin transaction, or I want to send you some data utilizing the Bitcoin network. You've got a address. I've got an address. I utilize some of my Bitcoin, which I unlock with my private key, and then I sign it, which means I unlock it. I then use it to create a transaction, and that transaction might be to send you, 5 cents. And so I then lock up 5 cents under your address, which then only you have the abilities with your private key to unlock.
Right.
I could either send that directly to you, peer to peer, and then you could broadcast it to the network, and the miner will then verify and validate that I had the right to sign and unlock it, and therefore now it's in your possession. Or I send it to the miner, and they verify it, and you look at your wallet and see the update. Now it's in your wallet. When I send that to a miner, when they receive it and they verify the signature, they automatically then transmit it to all other miners that are within their purview of their network, so to speak. And you could have, again, it's an open competition, generally speaking, to participation as a miner, which means that you're then going to purchase mining infrastructure, computational power to participate in this hash, right? You're basically taking guesses with all the other miners on a random number that you'll eventually, one of you will find, which will give you the right to put that block of the last 10 minutes of transactions onto the chain of blocks. We all, since we're sharing the transactions amongst each other, then we all have a mirror image of the current state of what is about to be placed on chain, give or take.
Let me interrupt you. That's the crucial part that people really need to understand, is that's why it's called the zero trust system, in the sense that I don't have to know anyone else who is validating this transaction, and that's the power of it. Because if a blockchain or any database, because blockchain is just a database, it's a distributed ledger versus one concentrated ledger. I own the data. If you own the data, you can mess with it. You can change it, right? If I own the blockchain, you have $1 million, I can just go and lock two zeros off it, and now you've got 10 grand, and no one can change it. But for you to be defrauded out of $990,000 in a public blockchain, it will require the collusion of people who don't know each other, which is the main point. Like, you cannot collude. You can't find enough people who are running the nodes to talk to them offline and say, guess what? Let's screw Greg out of $990,000. Great, we'll all take 2 zeros off. And that's the power of, and why people call it the immutable ledger. It's an audit trail that cannot be changed, and any one person cannot change. Because if you try to change it in the minority, the majority will overrule you. That's I drive that home because I think a lot of people don't get. That's why this is such a powerful system.
It's economically incentivized, and it's cryptographically insured. It begins with the beginning of a Genesis block, which was created at the first, right, which every other block is attached to. So therefore, if I attempt to go back as a miner into a previous block and attempt to change a transaction to say, let me point this to myself, because every block is attached to each other, then the hash, which is a fingerprint of every transaction in that particular block, will be changed in what you're trying to push forward. Everybody else who is mining are going to see it and say, like you said, rejection. It doesn't match what we know as the transactional history.
Right.
But it's not just that. It's not just me saying, hey guys, here's a fake set of transactions I hope you believe is real. It's me saying, hey guys, I just spent $250,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 mining with energy to find hopefully that hash, which will give me the privilege to put forth this false evidence, which you're going to reject anyway. So I wasted my money doing that. And if I do it and you guys reject it, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to continue to interject more money and then continue to push this false narrative and continue, I'm just wasting money until eventually I either give up and then as they say, the true chain emerges, or now we're talking 2023, we have a legal understanding and interaction. So where you have both a legal entity or government could say, this guy is actually fraudulently tampering with public documents, right? And he's also wasting money.
Right. Right.
And
Excellent.
not that's just that, but you also can't change a transaction without knowing the private key of the one who owned the coins to begin with.
And that's dwell on that for a second, because I think a lot of people hear, especially non-technical folks, will hear things like private key, public key. What does it mean?
So a beautiful thing again, it's this birth and then passing on a transaction to the next person, so to speak. So the very first coins that were mined into existence, because no coins existed at the beginning of the first, you know, I mean, well, the Genesis, you know, block produced the first coin-based transaction. I don't actually, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that those coins, right, so are not ever to be moved. Maybe it's an anchor, but like the idea is basically the coins don't exist until they come out through the mining process. When they come out, right? So the first miner who starts mining, he finds a block, and that first set of subsidy reward coins were 50 coins. So a miner who's participating as the job or role as verifying and validating transactions and mining blocks and producing these blocks of transactions, when they find one, they're rewarded with the subsidy. Initially, the very beginning is 50 coins. Every 4 years, it's halved until I think it's 2140 is when the very last coin will be produced. So they come into existence as far as into physical existence to trade when a miner finds a block. That 50 coins, now he says, well, I got to do something with these. So he sells them to Christopher because he has to pay his electricity bill for mining these coins.
Right.
Christopher now owns 50 coins, and he goes and buys a pizza. Now the pizza guy has these coins, but every time that you pay for a transaction, you're unlocking coins with your private key, which only you could do because you only have the private key.
So that's equivalent to kind of unlocking my wallet, basically.
Oh, exactly. It's like having a more secure version of your bank account PIN code.
Right.
Right.
Far more secure.
Yeah, well, and because here's why it's more secure is because most likely the bank has a copy of some sort of your PIN code or some way for you to reassign it, change it. So that means they have to have a way to be able to get inside of it too.
Right.
Whereas the private key, the miners don't have any way to get your private key.
Right.
Right.
So there's literally, you know, one point of failure. Whereas if a very clever hacker who also manages to get a job inside of a bank technical department is patient enough, could in theory get everyone's PIN code overnight and drain Chase Manhattan of, you know, $70 billion.
Exactly. And so if you had exactly,
not to give anyone ideas out there.
No, but you're absolutely right. So two things. One, as a miner or as a hacker, you couldn't even go into the blockchain and hack it and reassign coins to yourself because you don't know the private key. No. If you found one person's private key, you might be able to do something such as spend their coins that they currently have, but
Right.
that would be this only person you can get. Whereas if you broke into Bank of America's records, now you have access to all their social security numbers, all of their information.
Yeah. So largely speaking, technically, a coin is kind of an emergent property of a mathematical operation.
Yeah, it's exactly it's a result of proof of work of the miners.
So it'd be interesting to dive into some kind of practical implications. We met at the London Blockchain Conference, where it's safe to say that we were each, in our own way, the most scintillating members of the panels we were on. But you know, the stuff you're doing at CERTIHASH, Smart Ledger, full disclosure, I'm involved with both because it's a smart business. But like technically speaking, which I always like to take during these conversations, kind of like the old New York Tech meetup rules. The only thing you're not allowed to talk about is the economic model. But kind of technically, what is you know, both maybe from CERTIHASH's standpoint or just in general, what do you think is sort of the most compelling practical functional use cases that this technology enables that were always kind of desired, whether from a privacy perspective, security perspective, or any other, but that were impossible to implement until something like BSV, the Bitcoin Satoshi Vision blockchain came along? I mean, what are the most kind of compelling use cases technically that you've seen that arose from this technology that just aren't achievable in any other way?
I think the three greatest use cases that come to mind first is peer-to-peer cash transactions. Small as Satoshi says, casual transactions. The abilities to send Coca-Cola 2 cents model, right, business model. So where, let's say, somebody in a developing nation can, with a very intelligent and creative mind, they can go on, like as an example, and maybe snap a photo of some nature in their country, and then monetize that photo or monetize a blog and allow people to pay with microtransactions. So whereas all of a sudden somebody wants to, as a Medium article or something that you could read today, you might get halfway through, it says pay $12.95 for a month for the subscription. So you say, oh, what the heck,
I don't care that much. Right?
Yeah, I'll go find that information somewhere else if I can. Right. But if it's 5 cents,
yeah,
you gladly pay it. And now this guy in these different parts of the country, 5 cents, 5 cents, 5 cents, 5 cents. I've seen in my real life experience guys in Uganda who are selling their songs for 25 cents, 50, 75 cents US, awesome. utilizing micropayments of blockchain. And within only 3 payments of their songs, they were able to pay for cell phone minutes for the month because of the translation of differences in currencies.
Right. That's brilliant.
Yep. It really it allowed me to see just the power of small micropayments and what it does for, like you're saying, business models. But now you transfer that same idea of what that small micropayment capability can do it now to a business CERTIHASH. You're able to capture high resolution log states of network every 10 seconds for very small cost infrastructurally, and have an immutable ledger, auditable trail of in a private way that no matter which part of the world you're in, you could show this data to someone and say, hey, look, this is what just occurred on my network. And you can guarantee with assurance that's going to be the same today as it will be tomorrow. A hacker can't go in and change after the hacker's been caught with CERTIHASH and the log has been tampered with and it's been captured, that state change. He can't go back in and rectify that and erase his tracks.
And that's an incredibly important point for folks who have heard, all heard about cybersecurity risk by now, right? You have to be living under a rock to not at least heard that there's a risk to being online. That risk is sometimes amorphous to people, right? But what you're describing is this great application that says really good hackers right now will break into your network. They will rummage around. They will either leave something that they can use later. They will take something, maybe just like poking around, right? Whatever they want to do. And then they kind of back out and technically erase their tracks, right? So the log file is supposed to be the record of everything that's happening in your computer on your network, but a talented hacker can back out and erase all that. The beautiful thing about what CERTIHASH is doing is that by taking a snapshot, a hash, by taking basically a fingerprint picture, that this is exactly what is in this file. And if anyone can think of a Word file with 700,000 words, take a snapshot of that, and then a minute later, a hacker breaks in and changes a comma to a period. That tiny little change is enough so that when CERTIHASH takes a snapshot of that file again, it shows a difference. Now, it may not instantly tell you what the difference is, but it'll tell you there is a difference. And that is what I found so insanely exciting about the technology, is that it provides you a kind of spider web network to say, wow, something changed. It's not the be all and end all. It's still have to go find out what changed, but you're at least not unaware anymore. The hacker cannot hide his tracks.
Yep.
That is a phenomenal use case, and only enabled by the fact that the BSV transactions are so cheap, right?
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is if with micropayment, thousands of a penny, 5,000 of a penny transaction fees, now all of a sudden you're able to capture, like you said, how high of a resolution do you want your video footage to be of your room, right? So you have this inside look of your network, and now you have the ability to expand outward your amount of logs that you want to monitor, as well as how often you want to monitor them. Whereas, like you said, if it's on any other blockchain, you're dealing with one of two issues. You're either dealing with prohibitively high fees, too small of a block size itself to be able to fit, you know what I mean, and make room for your business, so to speak.
Right.
Or you're dealing with a band-aid solution, what I call a band-aid solution to a wrong direction that was taken because of this prohibitively small block size that the developers constrain BTC, current BTC, what's known as BTC, Bitcoin originally, Satoshi's white paper, being developed along the way when these developers said, no, we're keeping it to 1 megabyte, right? Whereas if you just read the white paper and you read, you know, I mean, the descriptions of large data centers will become what these mining facilities, you know, will one day be. Well, obviously they're not running Raspberry Pi's 1 megabyte size block, you know, limits. So. Right. Yeah, so I mean, so these developers, when they did this, it caused a whole generation of band-aid creators, right? How can we solve this energy consumption and scalability issue? So they carried all these other different ways. Proof of stake. Well, proof of stake now says whoever is richest in the room decides truth.
Right.
Right? Because I could hide my identity, but I could provide 100 identities as if I'm different people validating what truth is. And that's the difference. Whereas proof of work, you're only going to have your own entity with actual infrastructure, continually investing money to maintaining the highest quality, you know, infrastructure.
This is why we hate small blockers. They distort markets. Small blockers arguably could be analogous to Washington D.C. crony capitalism, but it's a philosophical argument for another day. What do you see as the kind of most exciting new developments that are likely to arise out of this? And I love the example of the guy in Uganda, right? That is what is an example of what Satoshi meant by sort of radical economic inclusiveness.
Yep.
You can get the cheapest smartphone on the planet and connect it to a network in a country where it costs you 80 US cents to be on the network. Mm-hmm. You can actually begin to make money. You can actually transact things. You can actually do things in a way that you could not before. That of course, to me, is the most radically wonderful part of this, and thing, you know, I think that drives a lot of sort of centrist control freaks nuts. That in fact, if you let 8 billion people do what they want, they will actually achieve better results for themselves than all of your top-down NGO feel-good dollar sloshing. Bigger point we could have later, but is there something kind of parallel to that, or on top of that, or that you see just from the technical standpoint that is also going to do radically interesting things for the larger world population?
I think that we stand at a precipice. I think we stand at a point of decision making and wonderful opportunity. I feel like in the world of building out infrastructure that is the new paradigm of Web3, we're like back in 1980 again, when computers were first being created, when this machine code was being, you know, I mean, turned into assembly code, and then higher level languages were being created. We're creating the modules and the things that are being needed to interact in a new way that we've never been able to do before. So we're seeing wonderful developers creating, whether it be, you know, smart contracts, automation of payments. We're seeing the banking institutions figuring out, and the government's figuring out, how do we onboard and interact with this technology whilst at the same time maintaining some level of business control, regulatory oversight, you know, all these things. They're trying to find their places. And so I think we stand again at a precipice of seeing opportunity, right, for those of us who want to lead and try to, as you said, develop ways for developing nations to onboard and become financially a part of this. It's not just, it won't just benefit them, it benefits everyone, right? Because the more content, the more interactions we get. But I think that we also see simultaneously central bank digital currencies, and, you know, this whole Orwellian feeling that people have of, oh man, if we are all on the blockchain, the government will be able to shut off my accounts, or they'll be able to do this, or have too much insight into my living. I think we, as those who are so interested, have to find ways to lead as best we can in our spheres, to adhere to principles that we want to see exist in the future for our children. The governments and the organizations around, they want to know about this technology. They want to know how best to make money and become more efficient. We, as leaders in this space, need to see how we could best take some of the old world ideas of privacy and a moral compass, if you will, and things that we've seen the revolution in America fought over, right? Private property rights. We need to see, in my opinion, humbly, if not or not.
No, we don't do humble here.
We need to see these things also be at the table of conversation, because the technological race is on. It's happening very quickly, and oftentimes money and technology seems to get pushed before people have critical thought.
Well, so I know it's an interesting point. What I also find so funny about, we all have, especially because being in this space, right, and knowing sort of a lot of radical libertarians who moan on about central bank digital currencies. The government can freeze your bank account now. Like, this is not new. Like, just because it's in Bitcoin or Ethereum doesn't mean it's unique. Like, just give the IRS a try. They'll seize your bank account. They'll come take your house, right? So this is not new. The idea that they're tracking what you're doing. Well, why they care is beyond me. But so that a lot of those fears. I mean, but the what I love about that is that the discussion has actually been sparked afresh for potentially a younger generation who, after a few minutes of reflection, will come right back around to like, wait a minute, they're already doing it. So that could have a salutary effect in people starting to demand change. What's done, the government will always, because it's a metastasizing beast, and it likes to grow like everything else, and patriots and rational people have to push it back all the time. And it always sounds so good. It always sounds so rational. But ask anyone who has had $30,000 in cash taken from them under civil forfeiture, where the government does not prove you've done anything wrong at all. They just decide you're not allowed to have that much money. Well, why am I not allowed to have this much money? It says right on the note that it's a bearer instrument. Like, what do you mean I can't have it? What are you talking about? So the government does that all day long right now. Police departments across the country will trump up some excuse and steal it from you and line their own pockets. It's appalling that goes on. So my hope actually has been that a lot of these conversations about digital privacy and monetary sovereignty actually get people to focus on the problem that already exists right now. It's not the future. They do it to you now. So how do we change that? That to me is a hopeful harbinger.
No, I love what you're saying, and I think that well, we're hoping that the transparency and the auditability, and so these different features of blockchain can be applied in ways that you're saying maybe can give a little bit more credence to the actions of officials. Give the abilities for citizens and to be able to not push back, but rather just clarify, receive answers that they're due, but also just be treated more fairly. And then maybe I think that quite honestly, the government officials then would be more happier, because they don't have to worry about whether they're doing things by the books or not by the books, because 99% of
they don't worry about that, my friend. They don't care the slightest. They are quite sure they're not doing things by the book, and they're very happy with that. You're a little more optimistic than I am about the nature of government officials.
Well, I think that there's got to be 30% of government, if not 70% of government, that really are just working as a part of the system, right? They want to be able to have efficient ways to be able to give you your FOIA requests, and that's really what I'm speaking about. Is just there's efficiencies that we could provide, and that would just make everything in life easier for a lot of different folks.
Yeah, here's something I found pretty fascinating, right? So I use the Hand Cash app, so that's a little bit of a plug for them, right? But it's all BSV transacted. So and I experiment with things. I've got a Substack read by millions, but I refuse to charge because the information is too valuable. But less facetiously, on Substack, I get it. They have a charging model through Square or Stripe or something, which is linked to MasterCard. So there are three brackets. If you want to charge, you ask people, do you want to be a paid subscriber, right? And sometimes people put their stuff behind a paywall, whatever. But there are three choices: monthly, annually, and you could be a founder, which means it's a much bigger ticket, and you get a mug and a sweatshirt, whatever. And I get that, but the headache has been, and I've watched it. I've watched other people on Substack, many whom came from legacy media like Barry Weiss of the New York Times, Matt Taibbi, right? And the problem is that I tried to do my settings. So long-winded way. I've got the BSV QR code. So if you want to leave money in the tip jar for my efforts, it has to be in BSV. But you can leave up half a penny, right? You don't have to leave a lot of money. But because of that legacy infrastructure of MasterCard and Stripe and Square, whatever they're using, I tried to set the monthly amount to 20 cents, right? So you could be a subscriber, because this is the main problem, is right? I can subscribe to all of the Wall Street Journal for $8.99 a month.
Right.
So I'm going to subscribe to one writer on Substack for $8 a month?
Right.
No, I'm not. I got some people do, clearly, but if there are 10 writers you like on Substack, that's $80 a month. I get data, investigative reporting, the entire machine of the Dow Jones empire for $9 a month. So they haven't quite gotten the model yet right. And the right model should be micropayments, right? So I tried to set it to 20 cents, and it told me $5 minimum. Well, I mean, I'm a compelling, deeply compelling writer, but right, I get that no one wants to give me $60 a year for something that I might write an essay every week. Again, pearls of wisdom.
You need that in between.
Jewels before men, but still, right? I get why that's not a rational economic model, and I do think that they switch over to a micropayments model mediated. But my long-winded point is, on hand cash, it's the amount of Satoshi I have, the amount of BSV I have is constant, but it's expressed in dollars. So every time you open the app, it's different. It's
Right.
29.45, 33.30, like, right. And that, I think, drives people really crazy.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand is, if I showed you your online bank account in British pounds minute to minute, even though you hold dollars, the British pound accounting would change minute to minute or second to second. So I think the biggest hurdle is around people's comfort with shifting values, because if you just have it in dollars, you think, I've got the dollars I have. But if your bank shows it to you in every other currency, it would just be this flashing, and you're like, how much money do I have? What am I doing?
Yeah, well said. It's really interesting, because what if we showed your dollars in your bank account in milk, right?
Right.
Purchasing power, right?
Yeah. How many liters of milk can this buy? And
Yeah,
you get
exactly.
a cowpox and a freeze in New England, all of a sudden I'm like, how much? You only have 9 liters?
Gasoline, purchasing power across. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then you just maybe think, of course, about just what is the reserve currency? What decides, what is things based upon? I'll give you a story about the platform where I was selling guys songs for blockchain currency, and these guys were able to make a living getting paid 75 cents a song. We did a fire sale, so we had 2 options. You could pay with PayPal, or you could pay with cryptocurrency, if you will, right? At that time, it was before actually I discovered BSV. I was using a cryptocurrency that was based out of London. It was kind of a new thing that I was new to the space, but discovering micropayments. It wasn't until, a short time later that I discovered BSV and the true history of Bitcoin. And then what BSV was capable of was not just micropayments, but all of the unlocked capabilities. Yeah. But I was turned on to the micropayments through this other cryptocurrency, and I had set up this e-commerce. We did a fire sale, 25 cents a song for today. Well, a couple of guys bought it with PayPal. When they pay with the cryptocurrency, they would receive 24.3 cents of 25 cents, right, if not more. PayPal, zero.
Wow.
Not one penny arrived. Not one penny arrived.
Right.
And so, I mean, just like you said, the difference is what is that friction? You know, I mean, it just gets in the way of true micropayment commerce, which people say, oh, well, that's not the innovative of thousands of a penny. That's all the innovation. As my colleague Brian says, that's all it's not innovative to send $1,000 across continents. It's innovative to send a thousandth of a penny.
Yeah, incredibly so. And like PayPal is a great example. I like to beat on those assholes all day long. They're the ones that decided, without telling anyone, that you're an American, you're not allowed to buy a perfectly legal product with our service. You can't go into Dick's Sporting Goods and buy a box of shotgun shells to go bird hunting because they don't like guns. Well, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to not let someone buy something, or actually, you are allowed. Tragically, they do. But then they introduced. This is great. About a year ago, they introduced quietly that they would feel free to take all of the money in your PayPal account if you wrote something on social media they deemed to be misinformation. How good is that?
Are you serious?
How good is that? I was thrown off LinkedIn in part because I just copied the text on the side of a box of medical masks, which describes the size of the holes in the masks being about 80 times larger than the size of the Wuhan virus, right? I literally just quoted the box and I was thrown off LinkedIn for spreading medical misinformation, which is a plot twist. Orwell, had he come up with it, would have had his editors put a red line through it saying that's implausible. Right. So that's medical misinformation. And I had 50 grand sitting in PayPal. If I kept using their service, I acceded to their user agreement and they could take my $50,000 because I pointed out the relative poor size of a mask, of an N95 mask versus the size of the Wuhan virus. And if no one finds that terrifying, I don't know what does scare you.
No, it's absolutely absolutely ridiculous, and like you said, Orwellian to the nth degree. It becomes this really interesting spectrum of private companies and their abilities to contract you into services and then dictate the terms, of which 90% of the people, 99% of the people don't read 99% of the terms and conditions of anything.
Oh, of course not. Here's your end user agreement in 7.2 pico type, and it's 90 fucking paragraphs long. You're like, yeah, sure, you can actually have. No, people don't understand. You're on Facebook. You put a picture of your kid up on Facebook. If some algorithm decides that's the prettiest kid I've ever seen, Facebook can take that picture and they can make millions by licensing it to Gerber around the world. There's nothing you can do about it because you agreed to their end user license agreement, which is that anything you put on that platform, they own. Madness.
Unbelievable. Well, and again, so it's an interesting thing because as human beings on this earth today that have been entrusted, right? God, the great trustee and grantor, given us our life in trust for the benefit of ourselves and humanity, right? We'll just have fun. But we're also the trustee of our own lives, right? So we have a responsibility. So it's probably one of the few places that you want to be in a pass-through trust, but benefiting and being the trustee at the same time.
Yep.
But you rewind yourself back to 1776. Rewind yourself back to these times when men and the interactions between other men made a difference. It still makes a difference, but people don't realize the contracts that they're in.
Yeah.
And this is a flesh and blood life that we're in, that where contracts are real. It is our greatest gift. The greatest gift on earth is to be able to say yes or no. The greatest gift, free will.
Yep.
Our greatest gift extended.
Arguably also the greatest curse.
The greatest curse. Both, but that's the joy and the beauty, right? Yep. Without that ability to make a mistake or make a right decision, then we're left with just a terrible thing. In that, we're now 2023, and people don't realize the contracts that have been, created.
They've signed.
So I think it's important for people just to take a couple of steps back and to look at that also as we're starting to create these new wonderful paradigms, you know what I mean? And as the world is shifting and shaping into new forms, it is tumultuous times, and we do have, you know, it is messy times.
Very, very. Thank heaven someone was smart enough to grab that and understand the value of that branding. I don't know who that genius was, but you know, we'll find out.
Someone needs to put that on the blockchain.
It's got to be on the blockchain, exactly.
Yeah, so it's really, honestly, it's fun. I count it as a joy, and I'm grateful for the opportunities, you know, to talk to guys like yourselves and to be at the center of really exciting times. So
Yeah. So last point. This show is always about ideas, not commercial plugs. But for those who are interested, give us 30 seconds on Smart Ledger and CERTIHASH, because there's a lot of work that you guys are doing, and you know, what was the genesis and why is it so much more smarter or better than other stuff in the space?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So Smart Ledger Solutions, or Smart Ledger, is our company. Brian Dougherty, Sean Ryan, original founders, brought myself and Ava Porras in as co-founders early on. Shannon Farrar is our senior project manager. And so we like to call ourselves the world's leading blockchain distribution channel. So we deal with a multitude of industries, as well as education, access, and expertise that we provide for governments as well as just organizations across the world. Our co-founder Brian helps to educate Congress and Senate and different
For which he should get the Legion of Honor all on his own for pushing a rock up that slippery, impenetrable, dense hill. I digress. But yay, Brian, and keep going.
But you know, so Brian and I, early days, one of the very first exciting topics that we spoke about how blockchain could solve and make things give improvement was cybersecurity, and CERTIHASH was born out of that conversation. And so CERTIHASH is our company that we created under Smart Ledger. Took a life of its own. Is now its own company, but it's mirrored. It's based upon the NIST cybersecurity framework. So you have these 5 functions of cybersecurity, which essentially is a framework that the government has, or the National Institute of Science and Technology has given companies to look at their cybersecurity profile and see how they could apply everything from identification of assets all the way to the recovery of assets that were destroyed or resources that were destroyed. We chose CERTIHASH Sentinel node as right in the center to detect breaches. 212 days global average for detection of a breach. We found that unacceptable. We felt like we could improve that.
I want to break in and emphasize that for people. What he just said is, on average, across the world, for corporations mainly, from the time a hacker gets into your network until the time someone in the company or the cybersecurity company that looks at your systems finds that person is 212 days. Let that sink in. 2/3 of the year, so a hacker's in your network, probing around, taking email addresses, getting bank account details, whatever they want to do before you even know they're there. So, hate to interrupt, but I wanted to amplify what that meant. 212 days.
Yeah, well, and to put that in a real life perspective, you know, I mean, you could be a lawyer who's got a contract that you have drawn up and you stuck in a stack of files that you said were completed. Now you have a stack of completed files that you have on your desk for a month. You know, I mean, like you said, 212 days is ridiculous. But imagine somebody coming in and modifying one of those documents. You go and submit it to court, thinking everything was cool.
Right. That's exactly the problem, right? You think you're done. You think the file is done in the physical world, but someone broke in, the janitor came in the middle of the night, took it out, replaced it with something else that says the exact opposite, and now your client is going to jail or is liable.
One more difference. One prefix difference.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, one dot difference, one dash difference can mean the difference between a judge saying thrown out, you know what I mean, tossed, you know what I mean.
Here's actually a great real world example of that, and why what this service is so great is that years ago in the mid 80s, I think, the Kayapo were a J-speaking tribe in the Brazilian Amazon, but a corporate entity, and then a mining company came in and cut a deal with them. Basically, the royalties, the magnitude is what matters. The royalties, let's say, were 12% per year, so they would get 12% of the gross revenues on all the gold sold out of this mine. That was the tribe would get. Well, they went to Sao Paulo, the representatives of the tribe, and their at this point incompetent lawyer who colluded with the mining company, and so they just this is a non-literate society, right? They don't have writing, and they're given a contract in Portuguese, and they have moved. Everything's fine in the contract, right? The full 90 pages are all the same, except they shifted the decimal point. So it was 0.0112% royalty, right? And no one noticed until 3 years in, the royalties started arriving. The checks were tiny, but the Kayapo have been watching the mine. They know there's gold going out of there. And at this point, of course, in the evolution of Brazilian society, many of the Kayapo youth had actually gone to school. They knew how to read. Some had gone to college. And they discovered this. And the best thing ever was, rather than go dispute it in court, 2,000 Kayapo warriors wielding spears showed up at the mine and took it. Like, bite me. Like, I'm not going to go argue with you. You lied to me, you scumbags, and we're just taking it. So now we have 100%. Now we know where decimals go. It was phenomenal.
Wow.
But not everyone has an army of 2,000 angry, spear-laden Kayapo at their disposal. So it's important that documents are accurate.
It's true, and I mean, and I know we got to finish up, but one thing that you thought caused me to think about earlier, which is, and we were talking about contracts, and someone asked me, one of the industries we're in within Smart Ledger, we were speaking about Smart Ledger, is the music industry. It's actually something I was, as well as Shannon, have been involved in for over 2 decades. So we've created Ticket Mint as an authenticated ticketing platform using blockchain. That's one thing, and it's incredible. I would highly encourage event organizers and artists to look into that for ticketmint.app. But digital rights management and publishing rights. So the abilities to instantly distribute recording rights, and so if you're a part owner of a song, I'm a part owner, someone's listening to it, we could automatically distribute payments and have an audit trail of streams. But I tell people, they said, "Oh, Greg, this is incredible." So yeah, as long as you're able to still make a good contract, because as you said, if you don't have a good contract, then I'm only going to get an instant distribution of nothing.
Yep.
So it's important that people realize that blockchain doesn't automatically solve things. It creates the ability to have an auditable trail, more efficiencies, instant distribution, all the greatest things in the world. But you still got to be mindful of what you're signing and what you're getting involved in.
Yes, because human nature does not change, even if we put it on the blockchain. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. I dearly hope my listeners got something out of this. If you've got, and think carefully on this, you've got one sentence that you want people to understand about blockchain, what is that sentence?
Blockchain provides more opportunity, more transparency, and opportunity for better life.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, I will close as I always do by reminding my listeners to turn off the mainstream media who are lying to you and tune into messy times.
Yes.
Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.